Hello and welcome to the Sensual Being podcast with myself, your host, Jolene Whiting. I have been a pole dance teacher for nearly 20 years. I'm also a yoga instructor, and my favourite pastimes are connecting to my own sensuality, connecting with the world, and connecting with animals as well. In this podcast, you'll find new and inventive ways of how you see yourself, connecting yourself with others, and also how you see and view the world around you. In this episode, we are going to be looking at tuning our bodies into the seasons of the year. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, and particularly at the moment as we are heading from autumn into winter. Hello, sensual being. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. I think that because we're in this time of year, we're going from autumn, heading into winter, darker days. I think it might be appropriate right now to pause this, grab yourself a nice hot drink. Maybe get a blanket or put the heating on or sit in front of the fire, maybe even light a candle, something that gives you a feeling of warmth and comfort around you right now. Because I would like to talk to you about the seasons and how they affect us and how we do try and push against them. So I absolutely love when seasons change. I love what it brings. I particularly love autumn and spring because I feel like they're the most noticeable. Sometimes we don't quite realise when we tipped into winter, and we don't quite realise when we tipped into summer. And sometimes our spring can be hotter than the summer if you're in the UK. So it's all a little bit different all throughout the year where I live. And I really love that because it makes me feel different. Now, we live very much in a culture that wants you to push, to keep going. If you're ill, you go to work. If you're on your cycle and you're having, your day one, you have to go to work. You have to still do that presentation. You have to still do this. You have to still do that. I know that sometimes, yes, maybe we do. But we still do get a choice. That is our choice. If we decide to push through those feelings of wanting to be a bit quieter, then that is our choice. So when we go into this part of the year, a lot of people push against it. Yeah. And if you are somebody that pushes against it and says, oh, I just hate winter. I hate it when it's cold. That's okay. I'm not here to demonize you or anything. Okay. So I just want you to open your mind just to have a little look at this in a different way. Because if you live your life always dreading winter, well, you're going to be dreading 6 months of the year for 6 months of the year. So you're going to be dreading the time it's going to come. Then you're going to be dreading going as you're going through it. That's no way to live. Yeah. So we do not have to let our emotional state be dictated by the weather. And I know that's easier for some than it is for others. But again, a lot of what I'm saying is actually choice. Some people choose to identify with, I hate the cold. I hate the cold. When you actually start asking people why they hate it, they can't really give an answer. They just do. It's just them. It's who they are. Yeah. And a lot of people are like this with the heat and the summer. Yeah. A lot of it is taken on as an identity. Now, sometimes it can stem from a time, particularly when you were younger. Maybe it stemmed from an incident that happened and you were very cold or you were very hot and it was summer or it was winter and it was quite an extreme feeling. Those sort of things do sit quite deep within us. And sometimes we don't even realize that some people go through our whole lifetime and not actually realize that that is what's going on. Yeah. So becoming conscious of what you're saying, how you're saying it, and how you are showing up as yourself is kind of very key here. Because now society would push against us slowing down, yeah? So slowing down a bit for winter. Now, you don't have to do what I'm about to tell you, okay? But generally speaking, this is very general, okay? So when we go into winter, the darker nights, shorter days, longer dark nights, it can feel a little bit like a void. Yeah. The darkness. And the darkness, particularly like the dark feminine, is seen as a bad thing. It's not. It really isn't. So these are the times of darkness are the times when you sit with yourself, you unpack yourself, you create from this void. Now, as something you probably don't know is that throughout last winter, I was creating this podcast. That was like my winter project. And I wanted to launch it in spring. And I was taking the time throughout winter to learn the equipment, to put it together, to test some episodes, learn how to work. I'm with Buzzsprout, so I learned how to work that. So that was very creative, and it was during the dark months. Now, you can create and launch at any time, yeah? But the beauty of what I did in those times was that when I launched it in spring is a time of newness, yeah? Seeds are like starting to come up through the ground. Things, are starting to start to bloom. They're starting. It's a time of starting things, yeah? So the fact that I launched it in spring was like a very much like it was brand new, and the time of year, like I could have launched it in autumn. There's nothing stopping me or you doing anything, yeah? But if you go with the seasons, they seem to support you so much more. So when you go into this time of like the dark time, the void, really allow yourself to lean into it. And I'm not saying like, oh, just be depressed. It's not that. Yeah, it's a time of being a bit quieter, a bit more time of reflection. And particularly as we're coming towards the end of the year, like you might reflect on the year of like how it's been, how you enjoyed it, what you weren't too sure about, and how you want to show up in the new year. It's a time for nurturing yourself, yeah, and allowing the earth to actually hold you through this time. So if you can get your bare feet on the earth, get some grounding, or just go for walks in nature, see and experience the change of the season, the bare trees, the leaves are nearly all off the trees now. See them in the starkness that they hold, yeah, and just know that come spring, the leaves are going to be regenerated back on those trees again, and they're all going to be new leaves, brand new. Trees were literally shed come winter. They were shed. There was something, oh no, I'm just trying to remember. I can't remember where it was. I'm sure it was, I want to say it was redwood trees. Not sure, I might have had this wrong. But they were injected with, oh my God, what was it? I want to say adrenaline. It might be wrong. So these redwood trees were injected with something which would mean that they wouldn't have a cycle, so that they wouldn't drop their leaves, and they'd just be blooming the whole time. Within a year, I think it was literally within a year, they all died. All the ones that were injected with this adrenaline or whatever it was, they just all died because they didn't have that time to come into themselves to then rebirth. And we see this through nature, through plants. Bulbs, they come up in the spring, you get your daffodils and your tulips, then they go. But you don't do anything to those bulbs, but they will come back. They have a cycle. And it seems like us as humans, we seem to forget that we are nature. And we actually have cycles too. And depending on where you are in the world, will depend on when that cycle happens for you. And we just live in a culture that wants to push you all the time. Push, push, push. But that isn't natural. Yeah? Because that's very much like summer energy is the pushing. The spring and the summer energy is like pushing, being in flow of things. That's when that time is. The winter is more of a time to come in to yourself, come home to yourself, work out things you want to do. I mean, there's animals that hibernate throughout winter. Let's not forget we are animals too. I'm not saying you should just sleep throughout the whole of winter, but you'll probably find that you do need more sleep because your body is telling you it's winter time. We need to recharge so that we can rebirth. That is part of our cycle of being a human being, a sensual being. And let's not forget, particularly for women, your cycle. Yeah. So your cycle will go through the same phases of our year. Yeah. The same seasons. Because when you're ovulating, then that is summer. But when you're actually menstruating and you're bleeding, that time is actually winter. Yeah. So when you actually link that in, that changes everything. Because actually, so not only do I want you to try and fit in with the year and the seasons of the year, I want you to think about fitting into your own seasons, your inner season of your own cycle. Now, if you don't have a cycle, that's okay. But you can tune in to the season, the phases of the moon. The moon does the same thing. So at the time of the new moon or the dark moon, again, that's menstruation, that's bleeding. And then at the time of a full moon, that is ovulation. Yeah. And it's mad how much the energy will go up around the time of a full moon. Okay. So if you've got anything, if you can try and work your life pattern in with this, I mean, it depends on how regular your cycle is, and it can be different for everybody. But if you can get a bit of regularity, then you know the times in the month where you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be on fire then. Yeah, I'm going to be able to do that, or do this holiday, or go there, do this, do that presentation, do that dance, or whatever. And then you might think, oh, that week there, that could be a bit of a low energy time. So I'm just going to try not to put in too much there. Yeah. So you can actually work this in. Now, interestingly, the fact that I said you can work this in with the moon, if you don't have a cycle, I think if you have a cycle, it's better to work it in with your own cycle, number one. But if you don't have it, or some people say that because of like birth control medication they're on, that they don't get any sort of feeling at all with their cycle. So then click over, use the moon. If you've gone through menopause, use the moon. Yeah, you can still use the moon for this. Now, the reason why, you might be thinking, yeah, but if I've got no symptoms, why should I? You know, what's the benefit? And that's a brilliant question to actually ask, and I'm going to answer it. And the same thing that I said earlier about working in with the seasons of the year is because if it's like the redwood trees, if you don't give yourself time to go inward or to slow down and then speed back up again, if you don't give yourself time, you'll just head into burnout, you'll head into fatigue, you'll be more anxious, you won't be able to deal with things, you'll feel like everything is just too much. I'm doing too much. Oh, I need a holiday. And then you'll give yourself your downtime. On holiday, you'll come straight back in. Nothing changes, yeah? How many times have you had that sort of feeling and you've gone on holiday, or you've had a weekend away or a week off, you've come straight in, and if anything, it's worse than it was before because you're now trying to catch up on everything that you missed, yeah? So honouring your body through its own cycles, and then honouring the actual seasons and the season changes is so important. Now, I actually have a friend of mine who said that, because you will, and this gets bigger than this, because I'm not going to go into it fully, but you also have life cycles, yeah? So depending on what personal year you're in, you'll have like a life cycle of like what that year is. So everybody's also different in that sense, in their whole world kind of thing. So I've got a friend who, come summer this year, she said, no, I'm still in winter. And it just depended on where she was in her life. She was like, everybody was sort of doing all this, like, oh, you know, it's summer, you got to push, yes. And she was like, I'm not. And she is somebody who really works with like the seasons and the energies around her. So it's so, you gotta really try and navigate this. So the more you can actually link in with the seasons, then the more you'll actually understand at the times when you're like, do you know what? I know it's summer. I know it's spring. I'm not ready to do this yet. I'm just going to take a step back, work on me for a bit more, and then I'm going to come back to it. Yeah. And it's not a case of giving up. This is very different than that. It's not about giving up. It's about when to give yourself space. And the more you can tune in with yourself and with nature, the more you'll be able to notice what you need and when you need it. So it's such a big topic. I hope that you've taken some things from that. Don't let your identity be wrapped up in, I hate the heat, I hate the cold. Do you know what? If you hate the cold and you're going out for a walk, wrap up. Do not go out in a teeny tiny skirt, because guess what? You'll be cold. And if you say, oh, I don't like the heat, okay, don't go out in the middle of the hottest day of the year, yeah, and go, here you go, sun, give it to me. No. So look after yourself at those times, but try not to use it as an identity, because you'll find as soon as you let go of that, you'll let go of so much that you don't need. It's the people that turn up to my classes and then they go like, oh, hello, nice to see you. And they're like, oh, it's so cold. And I'm like, nice to see you too. You don't need, like, to push that around. And then the thing is, negativity loves company. Yeah. So I could quite easily go, yeah, it's cold, isn't it? Yeah. And they're like, yeah, it's so cold. And you're like, what are we doing? Like, what's the point of this conversation? It's not getting anyone anywhere. You're not going to change the weather by walking around going, oh, I hate it. I hate it. Yeah. So reality check. You are not the weather. You are you. And you do not have to identify by these things. There'll be things that we've said for years. I used to say, oh, can't do the heat. Can't do the heat. And do you know what? I let that go, right? A few years ago. And I realised that I have to look after myself. I'm actually really good in the heat. And I actually really like it. But I do have to look after myself. I can't just go out and go, woo, in the hottest day of the year. I do have to be careful. So I know from my own experience that this can change, because I remember when I got with my partner 10 years ago, he likes going to Spain, and I thought, oh my God, I can't do that. Oh my God, I'm not good in the heat. And he was like, well, we'll just take it gently and we'll just see how we go. I was absolutely fine. And I was like, oh, because I thought, well, the good thing is we had aircon. I thought, okay, if I need to get off the beach, I can just go back to the hotel room, I can chill. And he was like, we'll just look after you, don't worry, we'll just make sure you're okay. And I think we've been out there quite a lot now in the past 10 years, and I think I've only had 2 or 3 times where I was like, I am so hot and I am not good. And it was times when it was sort of like high 30s, and yeah, it was really hot. And it just sort of got me that day. But it's not as often as I thought it was going to be. So you can actually change your thinking, change your mindset. Yes, this does work. This stuff works. So give it a go. Let me know how you get on. Let me know if it changes any of your ways of thinking. So thank you so much for joining today. Remember to lead through your life with your heart and to live with intention. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with your friends and on social media. If you have the time to rate or review this podcast, I'd be ever so grateful. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Jolene Sensual Being. The links to my YouTube and to sign up to my mailing list will be in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.